Okay, let's go ahead and go back to the home page. Any questions so far? You guys are doing awesome. Just so you know what our plan is we're going to keep kind of rolling through this, and then when we break for lunch, when we come back, we're going to turn it more into a work session, maybe have you work on some of these concepts that we've been covering, okay? So if I was to review just really quick, we already talked about locations and tax settings, a little bit about tools and maintenance, web and e-commerce, floor plan, elements of time, customers. We used a shopping cart to create an invoice for Mikkel, but we haven't really talked in depth about invoices and quotes. And we also talked about the AR waiting room for customers, which deals with like a time element of money. Who owes us? Where do we have it? Where's it at? Statements and customer logs. You guys want to go deeper into invoices and quotes, or would you like to go somewhere else? We're kind of just following this map around, like what do the different pieces do?
Let's see some other pieces of the map.
Great, great. Why don't you point me in a direction then?
Okay, how about, do we want to do vendors and manufacturing yet?
Okay, great, great. You want to enter from this side right here?
Uh-huh.
That's no problem. So why would this be on this side and a customer on this side?
Because the customer's buying something and the vendor is selling me something that I'm going to then resell to my customer.
Correct, correct. So a vendor on this side is bringing things into the puzzle, and usually a customer is taking things out of the puzzle, okay? So that's why we purposely separated them onto different sides, and it kind of helps with the logic and flow. So let's talk vendors for just a second, okay? I know that there's some other little things that are here. They really aren't a big deal. Like if you wanted to see it in a different view, here's a different view. Like basically it doesn't hurt anything, okay? But let's talk friends of vendors. Who would be a friend of a vendor? First off, what is a vendor? We talked about it briefly, okay? Now, a vendor is somebody who eventually you're going to have to pay, right? Ideally, or something that you would like to they need to start being in charge of things, okay? Or they have some sort of a relationship there. The reason we add the word payee in there, who can tell me what that would mean? Vendor payee versus just a vendor. Well, eventually, I'm going to show you this. This is one of their friends. Expense receipts. Okay, this is how we get money coming out of the bank. This is money going out. Well, eventually, a vendor is very well tied to an expense often. Okay, so the reason we call it a payee is eventually we want to be able to assign this thing to a check or some sort of a payment type form. Okay, so that's why it's called a payee. This is kind of interesting. Right over here in the middle, there's a thing called users. Basically, the way Adilas tracks it is a user and a vendor are very similar. The difference is a user also needs to be assigned. I'm going to get my marker out real quick, okay? And basically, we're talking about vendors right now. Vendors often deal with expense receipts, but so do users deal with expense receipts. See how that's mainly the people who you pay, okay? The other one that you could potentially pay is a customer, but in order to do that, you have to convert a customer into a vendor, and then you can pay him, okay? Like,
so is a user an employee?
A user is an employee. So this one right here, the users, what ends up happening is they get permissions. They can bounce. Hey, I have permissions to do balance sheet. I have permissions to do manage customers. I have permissions to do stock units. They see all these little tunnels and stuff. It's almost like they're able to walk around the site. Okay, a user is huge, but a vendor comes in from a certain side. They do not have permissions, but they're both technically stored in the payee table because they both end up attaching themselves here to the expense receipts. Okay, so let's talk about other possible friends of vendors. Okay, one, you could send some stuff out. You could be your own vendor. You could be doing some manufacturing, okay? This is, manufacturing sometimes has a little bit of a cloud of like, I don't manufacture, like you don't think you have an assembly line or you don't think you have a warehouse or whatever. Technically, inside of Adilas, anytime you take a raw product and then you transform it, you're technically manufacturing. It's no longer what you originally left it as, okay? So this could be as simple as this. I bought this bottle of water in a case, but I'm drinking it individually, okay? If I were to sell this individually, that's technically miniature manufacturing. I bought in bulk, and I'm selling single, okay? So I basically have to break those things in so that it now knows how to do it. Manufacturing could also be this. I'm taking this product and this product and this product and this product plus my time, putting it all together, and I have a final output. It doesn't have to run through an assembly line. We call it miniature manufacturing. Basically, you're modifying raw goods into something else, okay? They often deal with vendors, and even mixed vendors. Say, for instance, you had a recipe, something like this, okay? I know you like to cook, Cheryl. So say you got flour from some store, sugar from another store. Like, you had to pay those people. Those are technically from other vendors or whatever, okay? But when you're doing manufacturing, you're mixing and blending, and we kind of like allow you to create all that type of stuff. And when you finally sell it, guess what vendor it's going to go out as? You're going to be the vendor, your company name, okay? This is Cheryl's Home Baked Goods or whatever, okay? It no longer has Walmart flour or, okay, maybe you don't buy that stuff at Walmart, but you get the idea, okay? Who are some other friends of vendors?
Well, probably had to be, you bought something from them, so it'd have to be stock or units.
Okay, so these are big ticket items. Often you buy something from a manufacturer. You buy something else, like if I was selling Ford cars, I either buy directly from Ford or I buy it from a middleman, okay? So basically you have to get your inventory. So inventory basically goes like this, okay? These are all pieces that are kind of tied to vendors. Your general inventory usually comes through the PO. This is your path here, okay? Vendor, create a PO, we load it with the items, okay? That's the incoming line items on a PO. This right here is who do we owe? Does that make sense? So this is the time element of, do I owe for POs, do I owe for stock units, do I owe for floor plan, do I owe for, what do I owe? Or even different vendors. Here's some other pieces that are also tied to vendors. Vendors is a huge one. What about REIs and splits? Let's talk about what those are. What's an REI? Well, it's a store. You buy these.
Store.
You buy these outdoor stuff. REI, short for reimbursements. Okay.
Oh.
So if I have money and I spend it on my own account, but I want the company to pay me back, it needs to go into a container so that I know that I have to pay that person back. Okay. That's called REIs. It's basically reimbursements. That's way easier to say REI than it is to go, bleh. That's a big long word. Okay, what is a split? And this is kind of a technical term. This almost gets into Adilas vocabulary.
Partials.
Okay, you said partials? Perfect, perfect. Okay, so instead of putting payments on account, we basically said splits. So what ends up happening, let me give you the scenario again, okay? So say, for instance, we go to lunch and everybody gets their own ticket, okay? And when you're at the thing, we have individual tickets. You ordered this, I ordered this. Say the boss comes in later and he joins you, and then he's like, hey, I'll take care of all of your tickets. Well, what a split would technically be is what the boss is going to pay. So he's going to actually satisfy smaller little pieces of stuff. And so he basically, his thing is going to end up being split into smaller payments, okay? So that's payments on account. And if you're just doing one thing, it might be like, why do we call it a split? But it technically is built so it could be many. Say I buy from a certain manufacturer and I buy and buy and buy and buy, and they end up sending me an invoice or a statement at the end of the month. And say I have 10 different pieces of that. Well, basically what I'll end up doing is I will write them one check to satisfy that. But that one check needs to then be split to satisfy those little pieces so that it rolls forward and through the process. Okay, that's what a split does. Any other questions on kind of like who their friends are and such? This is one more thing. We don't do this very often, but elements of time can technically be connected to a vendor as well. Okay, so like if you wanted to schedule when certain things were coming, or if you needed to order at a certain date and time, you could actually put it on your calendar and tie it through elements of time. I'm going to just erase all of those little marks, and we are going to switch into talking about vendors. So if I click on vendors, it takes me to the vendor homepage. Vendor homepage is pretty simple. It allows you to kind of create, hey, what's my printable list of vendors? Here's the ones that I have under this particular play site. It has links to the payables homepage, another one of its buddies, which kind of is like, hey, who do I owe and what are we owing for? Here's some splits. Here's some REIs. Looks like I don't have any currently, and I have a bunch of POs that I'm owing on. So basically, vendors are very much tied to this. This is how you actually determine who does what and how things are assigned. So why don't we, in order to get this started, why don't you give me a scenario and then we'll walk through it and it'll kind of help us get started on it. Shannon. So let's say, here's kind of the scenario. We get something. Either we owe somebody directly for it and we got products, or we just owe somebody. Somebody did something for us, like they came and fixed our car or whatever. Some sort of vendor-oriented piece.
I owe tuition.
She owes tuition, okay? So technically she needs to write, so basically what we would do is we'd have a vendor, which would be the school, okay? And then we would end up creating an expense for that particular thing, okay? So what I'm going to do is we can either start from the vendor side or we can start from the expense side, like, hey, I need to pay some money to pay tuition. Which place would you like to start, vendors or expenses?
Vendors.
Vendors, okay? So basically what you would be doing here is, do I have this vendor in here? That's all you kind of would be looking for, okay? So here's what I do, select vendor, and what's the name of the school?
MCU.
Is that the actual name of it, or?
No, Midwife's College of Utah.
So I'm just go MID, okay? It basically limits you to 4 characters. The reason that is instead of just spelling and spelling and spelling and spelling, if you misspell it, it's going to be like, ugh, I couldn't find that. So we kind of force you into the smaller little version. So it's like, just take a shot in the dark, and we can limit it later if we need to, okay? So I'm going to see if I have anything under mid. I do not, okay? That was very simple. I know that I spelled it right and everything. So I would basically say, add a new vendor. And then I would come in here. What's the name of this particular? You're going to have to spell midwifery because I don't even know.
You're right. It's Midwives, MIDWIVES.
Midwives, what?
College. You could even leave it as that. It's fine.
Okay, great. And technically you would know the address.
Yes.
This is somewhere. And I'm going to go some city because I'm really being specific here. And then I'm going to actually say, this is actually anywhere. And the zip is 0000. Okay, the more information you put, the more you do, and when you actually create the check, technically this actually goes on the check unless you tell it to not include the address, okay? But you're able to put it in there. You can pop through here, phone numbers, faxes, driver's license, social security numbers. Anything that looks like it might be sensitive information, when it's actually stored, it gets kind of garbled up behind the scenes, and we store it as an encrypted version. And then when we grab it again, we're like, oh, they want that information. Let's unencrypt it, and I'll show it to you for real. So anything, if we're talking customers or vendors, and you're talking social security numbers or EIN numbers or account numbers, anything that we feel is sensitive, we garble and we encrypt it, basically, for storage. And then when you physically see it, you see it as if it's real. But then we also know who you are because you're logged in and you're going through the system. So those are basically the only pieces that you need. The only other piece is just active status. You could do email, flag for 1099, etc. I'm going to say add the payee. At this point, I've successfully added it. I now have a new ID number, and I have a bunch of links up here at the top. I can actually say, great, let's go ahead and create a new expense receipt. So right up here, create new expense receipt for this particular vendor. How much are we paying them? Really quick, before we technically just switched from vendors to expenses like that, okay? One click. We basically are now in the expense side of the puzzle. Just to give you a quick idea, added expense receipt right here at the top of the page. So to orient you to this, an expense has a main. It also has line items, which you can have as many as you want. It also has as many payments as you want. Okay, so we're basically creating a new object. All we did right now to this point is we kind of connected this thing to the Midwife's College. Midwife's College. Okay, so how much are we paying them?
350.
350. Okay, great. If you happen to have an external number, this is usually like a statement number, a PO number, whatever that you're actually paying, you could put it in there. And it does require some sort of things. This is called tuition.
Mm-hmm.
Tuition. How do you spell tuition?
Yes.
Okay. Tuition. So the next piece, this just to give you a quick idea, this is the main right here, okay? So the line items, it basically, as soon as I leave this field, watch, this tuition will actually populate itself right down here. As soon as I leave it, it automatically knows to force that down into that next section. So now what we do is we actually categorize it. This is actually where you're starting to hit kind of like in your accounting terms, this is where you're actually categorizing your expenses. This is what we call an expense type. For common accounting terms, lots of times they'll use chart of accounts. But this is almost like a quasi chart of accounts for expenses. Where's this going?
If
Okay.
you filled all 3 of those with partial payments, would it populate more that you could?
Okay, it doesn't here, and you can even skip this. If you wanted to and you're like, oh my goodness, I'm actually going to have to add like 50 million, you could go like this. You take this and you take that off, and you skip the whole section, and then you can add as many as you want later on. Like in a one-by-one basis, like, oh, I needed this, and oh, this one needed to be to this location. This is very important if you're splitting things, or if you need to be in more detail than what I'm allowing for here. You don't have to do 3. The requirements are main, 1, and 1, okay? But you can do main, multiple line items, main, multiple payments. Like, it basically turns into that one-to-many type relationship, okay? Did you want to add it through here, or did you want to add it singly?
No, that's great. We can add it through there. I was just
Okay.
curious.
We'll go 350, and then we select the type. Basically, you would have to have your types built. I'm going to say I'm not sure right now, okay? Just because we would actually want one that had, hey, this is for tuition or general or whatever, okay? And then how did you physically pay for this?
Big
Cash, check,
transfer.
a transfer. Okay, great. So we'll just go transfer, and sometimes you'll actually end up knowing some sort of a number, like if they actually give you a number, you could, that's not required, but you could key it in. We'll say add the expense receipt. So at this point, we have expense receipt number 25. This is its ID number. It's to the Midwife's College. It's for $350. We assigned it to the type or the grouping of, oh, I don't know. And we actually had a bank transfer. So this technically actually hit an outside entity called a bank. Okay. So if I were to jump really quick, we'll just remember this number 25 for a second. If I hit home, the expense receipt is tied to the vendor, and then eventually it hit the bank and actually pulled money out. So that's how that little transaction works, okay? So if I go to the expense receipt homepage, there's my number 25. I can either go to the edit, the printable, or the history, and it'll kind of take you through it. We'll just go printable, and if it was actually writing checks, it would actually prompt you, and you could actually technically write a check. Let's do this. Let's say that we owe them another one, okay? So from the very homepage, now that we've entered vendor, we're going to pay them again and say, what's another thing that we might be paying them for? Say like just a class fee or something like a field
Lab
trip
fee.
fee, a lab fee, okay? So watch this. I can go in a couple ways. I can either go vendors, expense receipts, or I can jump up to my quick search. Which way would you like me to go?
Quick search.
Quick search. Great. So what I was going to do is I'll go vendor, MID. Oh, perfect. Create the receipt. How much we owing them?
75.
75 bucks. Okay, and this is for a lab fee. Okay, we're going to pop down here. Once again, assuming that we have these categories already set up, and I can show you how to do that in a minute, but I'm just going to put it under I'm not sure. It already populated all the rest of my details. It remembered that I did a transfer last time, so it has that in there, but I'm going to actually change this to check, and then I'm going to put in a number. And I'm going to say add the expense receipt. So at this point, this now exists, number 26. $75 is already technically, according to the bank, has been taken out, but I haven't actually printed the check yet, okay? But you'll see, because it is a check, it actually says print check now. So if I click on this, it basically builds it up. This is just a preview mode. If I wanted to, I could actually hide and show different pieces of it, depending on what's going on. And then Usually I don't even touch that. I just wanted to show you that it exists, and then you would basically click print check, and then it would prompt you to see which printer you wanted to print that from. You would load your check into that thing, and you would technically hit print. I'm actually not connected to a printer right now, but pretend that I did it. What it would do is it would actually come back with a success message. Okay, I'm actually not created onto a printer right now. Basically, once you come back and you really did it, it would actually come back in here and it would change this button into a status of like, hey, printed, this and this and this, and it would actually record it. I'm not connected to a printer right now, but that's how easy it would be to do a print, to do a check. So this is another kind of cool thing with the quick search. See the 7778 for the check number? If I was up here, I could actually click on check and I could go like this, 777, and I could say, hey, what do we have here that matches? And here's a couple little things that match that check, but it would allow me to go right to those expenses if I wanted to be able to edit them. We have the main, the line items, and the payments. And we're able to kind of go from that point, okay? So we basically kind of switched from vendors almost to expenses without even knowing it. But here's another kind of cool thing. Watch this. If I actually clicked on, there's a link for payables. Right now we don't owe them anything, so it'll say 0. Like, I'll just show you. But if I actually wanted to search them, and I said, hey, go show me what I've got for, let me spell it right, midwifery. Okay, if I click on recent receipts, I can click right here and it'll tell me, hey, here's what you've paid in the last little bit, $425. Here's the dates, the times, are they paid, are they not paid? Like, it helps you know what happens. So what I do often is say I get a bill in the mail via email, like an automatic invoice or something. What I'll do is I'll actually pull up the vendor. The first thing I do is I'll pull up the vendor and I go to recent. Has this thing been recorded? Oh, it's not there. And then usually there's a link right there that says create a new expense receipt using this payee. So instead of doing any sort of search, I could technically immediately jump right into it. If I wanted to switch to a different one, I would just click those. Here's the difference, okay? If I say create a new expense receipt, it'll say who's the vendor, okay? If I say use this vendor, it basically says, oh, cool, got it, no problem. So does that make sense what those little links would do? Awesome. So we're kind of getting a little bit sidetracked. We're great. We're in this general quadrant here. What other questions do we have about vendors and payees? Or let's do a split. Let's do a split. You guys want to see how a split would work? Sure. Okay. So if you're okay, we're going to keep using that exact same midwifery thing. Say that you owe a bunch more. What would something that you would owe for? Say you actually had to pay for some sort of something more than a lab fee.
Conference.
Yeah. Say you're going to have to pay for a conference, okay? So here's how I would do it. You can do it from multiple different ways. I could either go to expense receipts and say new, or I could go to vendor and do a search, or I could go right to the quick search. I love the quick search because I can be anywhere in the system and do it. So let's see what I have in a WI for vendors. Okay, I have 2, Sherman-Williams and midwifery. I could say, boop, create receipt, okay? So a split, it goes through the exact same thing. The only difference is I'm going to put it on account this time, which automatically says, oh, we're going to have to pay for it later. So how much do we owe for this particular conference?
$425.
Okay, and this probably isn't happening today. What's the date this thing's happening?
In June.
June what?
5th.
June 5th. Great. Okay, and conference. Once again, we'll have to get into this a little bit later as far as like how to do these types. As soon as I leave that field, once again, it will repopulate down there. So as soon as I click on even this one or whatever, I basically left the field, and automatically, whatever my notes are in here, like it just automatically remembers what you want. As soon as I leave that field, it automatically populates it down into that next little field. If you don't like it there and you wanted to change it, you simply would just go like this. You would just back it up and do whatever you needed to do, okay? So it's very flexible that way. I'm going to just go ahead and assign it to the thing. technically, you've seen how we've skipped a lot of these pieces. These pieces are very important, but only when you're actually dealing with specific stuff. Are you paying for POs? Are you just tying it to an invoice? Are you paying for stock units? We've just been hammering out some simple things, and so we've been skipping them, but they do actually play a huge role. So we're going to come down 425. I'm going to click this little checkbox right here. It's going to say on account, changes it to 0. So basically what that does is as soon as I say add this expense receipt, it says, hey, 425, I come down, here's my line item for my conference, and here's my payment. And it now says, hey, you owe $425. So automatically, as soon as I did that, that automatically would now show up in my payables, okay, because it's not fully satisfied. And so that's an easy way to kind of put your bills in. If you wanted to actually put a due date, let's actually do that real quick. I'm going to hit Edit Main. When do we have to get this thing paid by?
April 15th.
4/15, okay. Close to tax day, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, so watch this. I just put this little due date right here. I'm actually in the Edit Main portion right here. And if I hit Edit this expense, so now it basically says, hey, 4/15, this thing is due. That date is now searchable in other places, okay? What's due? What's coming up?